Even though the table was still exactly as I had envisioned it, with silver flickering candles catching the light, nothing seemed to be going according to my plan. Every word they spoke now had a different meaning, and their discussion had slowed to a murmur. Her spouse was silently observing from the other end as she leaned forward and grinned in an unprofessional manner. Her eyes never left me, and my own husband sat between them, acting as though he didn't see. I then understood that this supper had nothing to do with his promotion. It was about pushing limits that neither of us had acknowledged. Please take a moment to like and subscribe to this video before I tell you how the evening started. It's not costly. You won't believe how much it helps. Additionally, it guarantees that you never miss the next step. I appreciate you being here. Let's begin at the beginning now. After weeks of late nights, I had spent the entire afternoon planning a little celebration for his promotion, something cozy and straightforward. There was a table for two, soft music playing, and the aroma of butter and rosemary permeated the room. I recall calming my anxiety and adjusting my outfit one last time in the hopes that he would finally unwind tonight. I was startled by the sound of the door. I grinned, anticipating his voice, but a woman's voice came next. He was already inside with her and another man I didn't know when I entered the corridor. She gave her introduction before he could say anything. "I hope it's okay with you. We wanted to stop by since we were just wrapping up a meeting." Her tone was inappropriate for someone meeting her employee's wife. I invited him to look into my eyes, but he averted them. Quiet and collected, the husband brought me a bottle of wine with a half smile of sympathy, as though he already knew what type of evening this would be. I pretended everything was okay by adding 2 additional settings. She praised the house, the furnishings, and even the arrangement of the candles. She was clearly measuring every detail rather than appreciating it. The atmosphere was heavy with courtesy by the time supper started. My spouse's laughter was a bit too loud. Her husband continued staring between them like a man analyzing a conundrum he didn't have to solve since she talked a bit too softly. Her eyes met mine across the table as she raised her glass. She claimed that it sounded more like a dare than a toast to opportunity. I returned the smile, appearing composed on the outside but knowing deep down. The purpose of this luncheon was never to commemorate a promotion. The purpose was to see how far each of us would go to maintain our desires. The wine opened too readily, as though the cork had been anticipating this. As I slowly poured it, I saw how the colour settled in each glass. Talk veered from travel to work to nothing at all. Between glances, every topic seemed to be a disguise for what was actually being spoken. Her fingers rested on his sleeve for an excessive amount of time as she laughed too easily and too frequently at one of his stories. Instead of moving it away, he simply grinned in the polished, practiced manner that men adopt when they are flattered but don't know how much it would cost. I maintained a level face and let the quiet speak for me. Her spouse then inquired about my cuisine. It tasted confident, he said. Like perfume, the word hung in the air. He held my gaze rather than his fork when I thanked him. The table seemed smaller for a moment, the humming silence that precedes the start of something. I inquired about their length of marriage. She responded on their behalf. "Long enough to quit acting as though you aren't aware of other people." Everyone, including and especially my husband, smiled faintly at the statement. Just to move, I got up to replenish the glasses. The boss came after and offered assistance. Her voice fell in the kitchen. Too close behind me, she continued, "He talks about you a lot." "Does he? You dislike surprises, he claims." I said, "I enjoy honesty." She grinned and carefully brushed my hand as she reached past me for the corkscrew. Then tonight ought to be fascinating. The dynamic had shifted by the time we got back. Now that he was more at ease, her spouse was reclining and casually discussing loyalty and advancements with me. Although their tone seemed courteous, every statement was an observation disguised as guidance. There was an unidentified charge in the air. the point at which everyone is aware of their share of an unspoken idea. I sat down once more, conscious of her by my side. She didn't sit down right away. She waited, allowing the quiet to last until I raised my gaze to her. Her voice was quiet as she asked, "Do you ever wonder what people say about you after dinner?" I looked her in the eye and grinned steadily. "Depending on how the evening concludes, yes." She chuckled and eventually sat down, but she kept her eyes fixed on him. From that point on, everything we said and did around the table felt like a test that none of us were going to pass. Silently, the formality had vanished by the time dessert arrived at the table. Voices grew softer, jackets relaxed, and the music I had previously programmed seemed to slow down on its own. What had started out as courteous laughing had changed to something deeper, calmer, and tinged with interest. She traced the rim of her glass while reclining in her chair. "You know," she replied, "until recently, I had no idea how isolating success can be." Her husband gave her a non-surprised expression. Mine feigned attention to his meal. Before he could respond, I did. Perhaps others celebrate to avoid having to experience it alone. Across the table, her eyes locked with mine. She grinned and added, "Exactly," as though I had acknowledged something neither of us had mentioned out loud. Even though I knew it wasn't, the next instant felt practiced. She got up and gathered the glasses. "How about we move this to a more cozy location?" Nobody disagreed. We trailed behind her into the living room, where the glass doors and candlelight blended together. She took a seat next to me on the couch, close enough for me to feel the warmth of her shoulder. The men took seats across from each other, but their talk was lost in the backdrop. To keep them occupied while something else developed between us, we exchanged meaningless words about job and travel. Once more, she reached for the bottle. "One more toast." "To what?" I inquired. To be honest, her eyes wasn't serious, but her tone was. Her fingertips touched mine as she gave me the drink. This time I didn't pull away. The wine had a calmer, sweeter flavor. Her spouse silently observed us, his face unreadable. My husband noticed, perhaps too late, that the power he believed he had was already gone as he glanced from me to her. I reclined, allowing the quiet to fill my lungs. She reflected me. Unconsciously, we synced our movements. Now every tiny movement felt purposeful. She crossed her legs, and I cocked my head to hear her. The atmosphere had shifted. She said, almost whispering, "You could feel it even in the pauses." "You have arranged a lovely table." She gestured to the area between us, but I believe this. It might be a better environment. Calm yet unguarded, I smiled. "Perhaps you came to learn that." Both men fell silent across the room, their voices blending with the music. There were a few long seconds during which nobody talked. The steady pattern of breathing was the sole sound. People were caught between what they knew and what they were going to allow to happen, and I fully grasped it in that silence. There has never been a promotion at this meal. After the formalities were removed, the goal was to observe who would initiate contact. Every time someone breathed too deeply, the candle's flames bent because they had burned low enough. Perfume, alcohol, and unsaid thoughts seemed to permeate the atmosphere. Everything we had left unsaid was generating heat. Nobody moved for a long time. The four of us sat in such silence that it practically hummed. With the glass still cool from the rain, I could hear the faint tick of the hallway clock. Every sound, including the shift of cloth, the little scrape of a chair leg, and the gradual inhalation that followed each line of speech, seemed more acute. The night seemed to have started counting its own heartbeats. The first person to stand was her. She approached the window with a slow, purposeful gait, the hem of her dress grazing the table. She was captured in fragments by the reflection, which included light, shadow, and the contour of a move. When she turned around again, her eyes met mine with a familiar ease. She questioned, "Is it always this quiet after victory?" I responded, "Only when it's real." and in the silence, my own voice seemed alien. She gave me a small smile before moving across the room. The others did not interfere as they observed. Their breathing even seemed to be in time with her footsteps. She grabbed a candle, used her fingers to trim the wick, and the flame shot upward, illuminating us all in amber. Everyone was drawn in by the edges that were softened by the light. Her spouse got up next, moving in tandem with her until he was standing next to her. My husband's eyes darted back and forth between them before turning to face me and asking a silent query. Whatever this was, nobody appeared prepared to stop it, and the stillness eventually came to be accepted by itself. I was the last to rise. As if to create room for us, the shadows bent as the room tilted in the light. There was still wine on the table. Nevertheless, there was a strong smell of it. Reaching for the bottle, she slowly filled each glass to the same dark line. Her fingers remained close to the rim as she returned mine. Only a hint of warmth, no physical contact. For a little period, we stood like that, surrounded by flickering light and silhouettes that were only connected by silence. Every tiny sound, the flame popping, the breath coming through a half-smile, felt magnified to the point of near music. I could feel the room's heat rising, not through physical contact, but via consciousness. Every look seemed a bit too drawn out. Every word had significance that went well beyond its literal meaning. The next discussion was interrupted. Something that didn't require words was interwoven with half quiet and half laughing. The minutes went by. The curtain was adjusted by someone. A glass that was already full was refilled. Everything started to have a mesmerizing beat, move and stop, breathe in and out, until the furniture itself appeared to wobble over time. The city outside had quieted down, and the candles had turned to puddles of wax when the clock struck 2. For the sheer reason that nobody wanted to be the first to leave, the 4 of us stayed in that circle of waning light. By morning, the room had reached its ultimate silence. The last flame had extinguished, and the air had cooled. The aroma of rosemary permeated the darkness, plates remained undisturbed, and the wine was only partially consumed. Nobody brought up the promotion once more. We were not required to. The quiet between us served as both a reward and a confession. Nothing had changed by sunrise. The candles had burned to the ground, the table was still set, and the dishes had not been touched. However, the equilibrium between us had changed, silent, unchangeable, and the kind of shift you don't publicly mention. Witnesses are not necessary for certain nights to feel permanent. All they require is the appropriate quiet and the fortitude to maintain it. To be honest, would you have ended the dinner or continued to see how far it could go if it began to become personal? Let me know in the comments. I'm going to read. Additionally, please take a moment to subscribe and like this video before leaving. It's the easiest way to help the station. Additionally, be sure to never miss the following tale. I appreciate you being here. See you at the following one. Drawn back into Carson. My spouse put his mouth to my shoulder and let out a moan that I missed. I opened my mouth, but nothing came out. I reminded myself that we were merely curious and listening. However, I stopped watching when they touched me. I didn't want it to stop, even though I was encircled. Tell the truth. Would you have answered the door if your neighbours had knocked that evening, or would you have continued to act as though you hadn't heard them? Tell me in the comments. I'm going to read. Please hit the bell, like the video, and subscribe if the narrative stuck with you. It keeps you here for the next one and helps more than you could imagine. Until the next story.